this. Okay, so what's the difference? Where's the high res and what's this is the game res. So how and what, you know, you can tell there's a couple little things I need to clean up, but in general, this is what a game res should look like, which if you look at them next to each other, now we're gonna make it easy. Okay. You'll see they're pretty much the exact same thing. This just has a texture on it right now. And we can go 360 around it, and this is where we want to be. So what do you mean? This is a 7 million poly for just, not for this one area, but for the whole thing is 8 million polys. So how big do you guys think this one is? Now we're talking...
A few thousand?
How many? That's a safe bet. A few thousand.
I would say 9,000.
It's 5,000 polys.
Okay.
5,000. And I could go lower. So that's the reason. And 5,000 in today's age is nothing. If this whole project you end up being 10,000 polys, it's perfect. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're working on a Selfo game, unless you're working on Genshin, whatever it's called, and even that game blows me away because it's, if you haven't seen Genshin Impact, isn't it? Right? You all seen that? Yeah.
I'm playing it. It's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Not a lot of content after you blow through it all. But.
Yeah. Well, it's MMOE, so.
I was actually asking you about that because they use parallax occlusion all over the place
Yes.
on the ground. So that's what I was asking you.
Yeah, I know, and it's not as effective. And the parallax occlusion, I'll show you I'll talk about it after the break, just to give you all what that is. Basically, it's a higher end normal map, but it still doesn't break the edge of the object. So you know how with a normal, if I look at it and I go really close to the side of it, it looks flat, right? Y'all know that? Yeah? So with the parallax occlusion, it does the same thing, but it does more in some other ways too. So what it'll do is, as long as you still are inside of the plane, it will give the illusion of pushing off the plane. But as soon as you see the edge of that plane, it cuts it in half. So if I see in Photoshop, and it's really good if you inset your objects. If you can inset your textures, it works great. But if you don't, then it looks weird. It's really cool. I mean, it really looks cool, and then you get to look at it and you go, wait a minute, oh, that's kind of weird here. But if I take this and I have a plane, apparently I'm drawing in cartoon. Oh, in pencil. I don't know what I was working on. I'm sure it was a plane thing. Anyway, if I have a plane, it's really cool because I can have like a sphere here that will give me full 3D, right? It'll be all, it's really, I'm going to do it on a separate layer here. So I can make a bubble. Like this, and we'll just do a little, highlight bubble on it, and you can see through the inside of it. It'll be a little darker in here, and it's full 3D. And if I turn around it, as long as I'm inside this plane, it's beautiful. But as soon as I hit the outside of the plane, it does this. Do it this way. Oh, I need to do this actually. Stupid changing shortcuts. Oh, I mean, I don't mind that they do, but it's also like, what? As soon as I go off the plane, it just stops. It cuts it off. It's still bubbled, and it'll still look like it's pushing off the surface, but it cuts it because that edge of the plane is where it's defining how it feels like it's 3D. Unless you have another plane next to it, if you have another tiling texture. But eventually you get to the corner and, it stops. It just kind of cuts the bubble or whatever in half. So it's really cool if you're inside of, like, they used it in Alien Isolation for the pipes and stuff inside the walls, because you can never get your head so that plane breaks the surface. But it's still got its limitations. Whereas, obviously, tessellation won't be working on the phone very much, or I'm sure it will eventually, but right now it's not. Anyway, so 5K is not that much. And if we say 10K for this, and it's a hero object, it's definitely not that much. We could put a lot more into it. But how did we get here? How did I get to that point? And it's funny because I did it a few different ways. And then, like I said, I went, you know what, I'm just going to do it the way I like to do it, and which I remembered this semester again, because this is the way we used to do it. We used to build everything in Max or in Maya or whatever, and bring it into ZBrush and sculpt on it, kind of the way you're doing it now. A lot of the really heavy ZBrush people work straight in ZBrush and never go into Max until they're like, or another program until they want to unwrap it, or until they want to down-res it. Because the down-resing tools in here, while they're the same as everybody else's, they're different. I mean, they're just because it's ZBrush and everything's always different. Okay, thanks. So that's, and then we used to bring it out of here and just bake onto our low res. So we build our low res, go up to medium to be able to bring it into ZBrush, sculpt the crap out of it, and then use the low and the new high and get our bake. And we stopped doing that for some reason, and I think there was a couple of flaws with the way we did that, and then and we found other ways of doing it, and everything new hotness, everybody finds new hotness, and we just try and do the new hotness all the time, and or we're in production, we don't have time for any of that, so we just stay with what we know. So for us, there is another way to do it, and there's a way to do it in here. The only thing that I don't like about the way we do it in here is we're still going to have to unwrap it, and you'll see the mesh when we bring it out of here is going to be a little bit messier, and I'll explain. Basically it loses its loops. It just goes into a big twirl around the object, but it's still pretty good. It still works great. I mean, it's just not quite. Who is this? Hold on. Which student is this? Oh, Jalen. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do. What we could do, and I'm not going to do it the way that a lot of people have been doing it, and they found that there's actually 4 or 5 programs that'll do it for you and all this other stuff. And not do it for you, but you can do it in. They all do the same thing. And basically, it's like this. Trying to think if there's the best way to do it in here. Well, first thing you want to do when you down-res is you want to figure out what you want to do. So in this case, I have all of these are separate polygroups. And probably, if I'm going to use this as a bake, I need to deal with that. But the big thing you have to remember is now you're just ignoring this being your high res. You need to throw this away as your high res, or put it away as your high res. What you're going to do to this is going to break it. So you don't want to use the original. You definitely want to keep the original around. So what we usually do, and the easiest way to fix this problem, is we just come down to merge, and we say merge visible. You click on merge visible, and then it makes that new version of itself right here. And the cool thing about merge visible is it's actually still separate pieces. They're still, but they're based on polygroups, so now every piece is separate. So if I wanted to re-separate this out, probably the smarter move would be to do it like this, come to like this one, and then just Control W, so it's all one polygroup, and then this one, and then Control W to all one polygroup, and this one, and Control, oh, not E, Control W, and so forth, and just grab them all. That way, when I bring them in, when I do the, that one should be one polygroup. That one should be one polygroup. Now, I didn't do this earlier because I hadn't come back to make any specialized baking, but so that's probably what I would want to do. So let's just do that. All I do is Control W. If I click on any object in its like, and if I want to break them up again, I just say auto groups, and it'll auto group them. And if I push Control W, it'll make it its own polygroup for the whole object, the whole layer, the sub object in here. Anyway, so I'm going to go back in here and say merge visible again, and then I'm going to come back to here, and you'll see that now they all are one object, but they all have their own polygroups based off of what I just did. So again, this is pretty cool. If I wanted to separate them when I got them in here, I don't necessarily want to do that in this case, but it is something that's an option. So if I wanted to bring this into Max, or if I wanted to bring this into ZBrush, into Substance Painter, the first thing, and this is the rule I've worked with for years, so I'm sure there's some leeway. We could probably go higher now, but we just try and keep it under 2 million. And we just down-res it to get it under 2 million. And there's two ways to down-res it. There's the Dynamesh way of down-resing it, which makes it a little bit softer. And then, well, there's 3 ways, but there's 2 ways that we generally start with. But with Dynamesh, you can take it and say, this isn't the first, I'm not saying this is the final down-res, this is just the first step in one of the ways of doing it. Dynamesh, you can say, keep your groups. So when I Dynamesh this, if I just do 128 right now, and I go back to F, it kept those groups that I already had. So if I wanted to keep those groups for whatever reason, then I could do it that way. The more accurate way, and then really, a lot of people just do this. They just turn it way up and do Dynamesh. And let's see the difference. There's very little difference right there. And we are going to Dynamesh it, and I'll explain why in a second. But, you know, that's an easy way to do it. And just by pushing it up to 1,000, you know, it's very lightly noticeable. What it does when you Dynamesh it is if you have a bunch of separate objects, they are now welded together into one big piece. So that's one of the reasons it went down from 4 million to 2 million, because it's all, there's no interior edges of any of these anymore. They're all being used the same way. They're all using the same, they're all one piece of solid geometry. The other way to do it is different, is you come over to here and you say Z plugin, and we've used this before when we did our sword, and we just say decimate. So I'll just say preprocess current. And the problem with this one is it doesn't keep your polygroups, but it also doesn't weld it so you can get your polygroups back if you want to. The big problem with this, if you're using it for this, is that it triangulates everything, which isn't a big deal for the high res when you're bringing it into a game, when you're bringing it in to bake a normal off of it. But it's a big deal if you want to unwrap it. That's the really reason that triangulation matters, because the computer sees everything as triangles anyway. But if you're going to unwrap this sucker, you want to keep it as clean and easy for your own brain as possible. Okay, so one second. Let it finish here. Alright, so I've done that pre-process, and I can look at this. Push the wrong button here. Maybe it's still thinking. There we go. Okay, so it hasn't done anything yet. It's still the same. Everything's the same. But if I push decimate current down to 20%, it'll go really fast down to 800K. Now, here's the trick. I don't see a difference. Does anybody see a difference? If I go to this, and then I go to that. That's 800,000. That's 4 million. 800,000, there's a little change down here. 4 million. Okay, so I don't see a big difference. Well, it's even better than that. But here, let me do it again really quick. Oops, I'll just do it. There, 800,000 this is what it looks like. And that would be a nightmare to unwrap and to try and flatten out. So, we could also go down here. Is even the amazing. This thing is amazing, and this is how I always down-res my high-res when I'm going to bake anyway. Usually, let me turn that off. If I go down to, let's say, 1%. Now we start to see it. So 5%. There, 200,000, and I barely see a change. So probably between 1 and 5%, I could get the all the detail I wanted still working and bake it out. But again, this doesn't really help me with the unwrapping. So what we're gonna do, but what some people, when they have 8 million polygon things, they like to decimate it first and then do the Dynamesh, because Dynamesh and decimation and Z-remesh are all look at form. So if it's looking at form, it's fine. But you know, there's just those 3 options to work with. So what we could do is, what we're going to do in our case is I want to keep the groups for actually no particular reason, but I just did it this way earlier. So usually I go to here. I like Dynamesh anyway. I'll go to like 1,000 because it seemed to work pretty good, and I'll just Dynamesh it. And there we go. Okay, so still 1 point. It's still 2 million. Way too dense. Would suck to unwrap this because you have to deal with all those polygons. So after I Dynamesh it, what I try and do a lot of times, and again, remember, you're not trying to keep everything perfect. That's what the normals are for. You're just trying to make a version of it that looks better, right? That will take the normals and enhance the normals to a level that is almost impossible to tell where the normals are and where the geometry ends, unless you know what you're looking for. So we'll try it down to 500 and see how bad it goes. Of course, in ZBrush, when you want to change something on Dynamesh, you have to change something. So I just push Shift and smooth, just changed it, and then when I do the off pull, it'll work. So I start to see a difference, right? And if I look at this F, it's down to 496. So we're down from 4 million to 496. It's still not bad though. So I'll come back in here and try 250. Again, smooth something, do it. Okay. 250 is not bad. Again, we probably want to look here. It starts to do weird things here, but believe it or not, the one thing that I love about ZBrush is it's a liar. It doesn't do smoothing. So anytime you see any weird polygon stuff, more than likely those are going to be gone, because when you take it into a program that has smoothing groups that just smooth the edges of the object, they're going to disappear. But anyway, so this isn't bad. The one big thing about ZBrush that it does, besides making these, since I didn't actually put binding stuff inside between the top layer here, this is great for me because it just welded them together and it gives me that same look. But the big problem about ZBrush, or not ZBrush, but Dynamesh, and the thing you have to keep in mind, is it also closes everything up. So now, if this was even open, it would have closed it. So that's extra polygons I probably don't need. Not a big deal, just means I have to pay attention to that and get to it later. So I'll come in here, and I'll go down a little bit more. I'll try 128. Change it, 128. Still not too bad. It's starting to lose a little of the edge stuff in here. And if we look at the mesh, it's kind of, you know, falling apart. It's not super clean or anything. I don't think we have a loop that's easy to grab anymore. So what we may do is go back up one. It still wouldn't have loops here, but let's try and use Z-Remesher, because Z-Remesher is supposed to be better about giving you your loops. It's supposed to be made for down-resing for game res. It's the auto button that probably the best one on the market as of now. And again, one of the things I want to point out is this is easier because we're doing a organic-y kind of model. If this was hard edge stuff, there's a whole different dance you have to go through, and you'll get into that as you get higher in the classes. They did a gun and stuff that was pretty amazing stuff. So that's a whole different thing, and I don't even think they use ZBrush in a lot of cases, because unless you're doing some, you know, stony or character stuff, then the GUI stuff isn't as important. Anyway, so inside of Z-Remesher, we have options here. We have half, we have 5,000 polygons, we have this thing called adaptive. The adaptive is the first thing I want to talk about. Adaptive, if you click on anything, control, and roll over it, it will tell you what ZBrush that thing does. But what it does in a nutshell is it prioritizes the form over the poly count. So if I tell it to go 5,000 and at 50% adaptive, it's not going to be 5,000 because it's got too many things it's going to try and keep. I don't know what how the ratio it figures it out, the algorithm, but it's like, you know, 50% of the time it'll go for form. So usually in the beginning I leave it on, and I don't ever use this number because I never know what it's going to be. I just kind of get there. I use this. I use half, and then we'll just push Z remesher. And right now we're at 117. Let's see. We'll just, in fact, I'm going to do this too, so we get stopped being distracted by colors since it really didn't matter. There. And then I'll do Z remesher this way. It's supposed to be going in half. Okay. So it's down to 62. It's pretty close. Pretty close. Let's see what the mesh looks like now. Okay. Now we're talking. Now we're seeing that there's a lot cleaner meshes going on. Look, it's like almost loops all the way around. But don't be tricked. It's more than likely, I can't prove it at this point, but more than likely it's called a spiral, which means that this loop here, as it goes around, it ends up being the next loop up the round and around and around. So you can't just grab one loop. It's going to go all the way and spiral through the whole thing. So, you know, it's still not what we want. But it's if you're not, and here's the big thing too, if it's not an animated object and you're just trying to make it look as good as possible, then it's not super important if the loops aren't tied up. The biggest thing about the loops is usually after you do this, you want to go clean it up. And it makes it hard to clean up if you can't just get rid of a loop at a time or something like that, which you'll see in a few. So I'm just going to click it again, half again. And I've tried it where you don't even use the Dynamesh and just go straight to Z remesher. And I've tried it without, with going into it. I tried it from decimate and do it. So now it's down to 33. Again, it did go half, and you can see the polygons are getting bigger, and we can see a lot of this information, and it seems to be doing pretty good. But I promise you, it's looping or it's spiraling. So at certain points, if I do this again, obviously 50. By the way, double this when you're thinking try count, because this is only polys, so it's actually 66K. So now it's 40K. Still not too bad. It's got some interesting stuff going on, not horrible at all. And don't forget that the bottom is probably going to be deleted off. We could do that now too. We can just come in here and do something like grab this bottom layer here. Make sure I just grab that as much as I can. And then I'll just say split mask points. So now now I have a new layer that's just those. So I'll delete those. And there's where your loops, you can start to see how it's going up. It's like jagged because this loop doesn't go all the way. It keeps going up and up and up. And you could chase this for a while. There's ways to get rid of it, and we can talk about that at some point. But anyway, since it's not Dynamesh, it's not going to cap it anymore. So now by doing that, I've dropped down to 14. So I've dropped 10K by just throwing that stuff off the bottom. Then I'm going to come back to geometry again, and I'm going to try it again. 9K. So it didn't go a half. So this is where you start to go, okay, wait, why didn't it go half? And now it looks like those loops are actually affecting the way it's curving around this thing. But that's fine. Let's take off the adaptive. And I do want to point out, let me go back actually and do one thing here. I'm going to undo that one. You can also push Alt. I think it's Alt. Is it Alt? Maybe Control. And click Z remesher. And it does a different algorithm, and you'll get different results. So sometimes you want to check it, do it straight without the algorithm change, and then, or do it with control. And it's easier to see on faces and characters, but with this one, since it's all spirally, it's hard to tell. Here, maybe if you look at that part. So this is the regular. I'm looking at this right here. And then this is with control. Looks pretty similar. Let me try shift. Oh, that's the same. Try alt. Can't remember which one it is because I rarely use it. Yeah, they're pretty close. It's just that it's such a simple shape that it's not going to make a difference. But if you ever try it, you can always go through it and do it. And I think it's... Come on, tell me. No, it's not going to show me the tool. There we go. I think it's one of those hidden things. And also you can go back to 2018, which is another version, another algorithm, and you can use control on both of those too. So you'll actually have 4 ways you can do it. Anyway, so we're going to keep going down. We're going to turn off adaptive this time, because with adaptive turned off, it's going to focus more on down-resing. So I'll say turn off adaptive and push the remesher, which goes faster, by the way. So now it's done. It's gone less than half. It's 7K. It's about half, and you can start to see that spiral like a candy cane right there. So still probably about too high. I mean, probably 10K is fine, but let's just do it one more time, see what we get. Meh. Okay. So this is probably the best we're going to get for this. And this is fine. So then you would bring this into max, and you'd unwrap it, and then you'd use that high res that we already have saved the other place, and use our low res and bake them on top of each other. But what was I going to say? The other thing you can do is a little bit different, and it gives you, in my opinion, better results. It's just old school. And one of the things I don't like, well, this model, when I made this model, this is a little bit shallower than this side, so it's off. The stones are off on this side. The other thing about this model is this is a pain in the butt. I don't know if you guys all put these in, but this is kind of a pain in the butt. So anyway, so we're going to do it another way. Oh, the other thing I was going to show you is this. The other way to down res, one more time, and this is the way you'll see a lot of people do it when they say they re-topo. It's called they're rebuilding the topology from scratch. There's a few ways to do it in here. I'm just going to do that merge again. Merge visible and make a new one here. Don't care about that. And then there's a couple ways you can do it in here, but the way that I would probably do it if I was going to do it this way, I'm not going to use the Z-sphere way. That's just silly. Is I would use... Hold on, where is it? Topology brush. And it doesn't like my dynamics, so it's going to turn it off, which is fine. And what a topology brush does is it allows me to draw on the surface. Let me do it with a pen, it'll be straighter. I can draw the surface, and it's actually drawing on the surface of the object like this, and like this, and like this, and like this, and like this. Okay, and then I could draw another polygon there, and stuff like that. And I could cut this in half and get 2 polygons. And then I think it's click Alt, and it will, now I've got the topology on there. Now the problem with it is, hold on, is there's a couple of tricks you have to play with when you put it out. I think that's in, oh, I think actually that's brush. That's why. If I click on the object now, there you go. No, that's not it either. It's the intensity. The way we used to do it inside of with Z-spheres was down here in initialize, or no, not initialize, but unified skin. But that's not the way you do it in here. It's weird. Oh, it's not intensity. It's the size of your brush. So let me shrink my brush. Yeah. See how thin it is now? So you can come in here and draw this out and really get something that you like, and just really build each polygon. If you roll over the green dot and then click up, it'll keep from that position. It's just really kind of fickle, and you probably want to try and cut it where you think the geometry is going to change the most. So like here, that way you've got a piece for that, and this, and that's basically what retopology is. And I think if I click Alt off, no, not that one, hold on, Control off, oh, click off, that's not it. Then why is, maybe my keyboard's whack. Now it's click and drag, hold on, click and drag, there you go. It gets rid of all your extra edges. So if I want to add more, I can do this. And again, it depends on which way you're looking, how it draws it. Like that. And I can come down here, I want to go there, and I want to go here, And then it's being stupid. See, it's not even closing them. So let me come back to here and try it from there. Okay. Oh, my brush is probably too big. Hold on. Yeah, I don't know what it's doing now. There it is. For whatever reason, it doesn't like this one. Probably because, it didn't cross that form. So, by drawing it this way, it kind of drew it across the surface. So really what I want to do is do this one first, and then draw this one to there. Yeah, and then this one to there. And you can take your time and really redraw these polygons. And then like say, ooh, I really should put one inside of there. And then notice that I should do it from the top down. Hey, you suck. What are you doing? Like that. That way it caps it. It's just because I'm going to this end here. You know, and you can rebuild your whole topology this way. And we're not going to do that in the class this time, but for character stuff, it's kind of cleaner. But again, us old schoolers went through so many nightmares to get to the point now. See how it's doing that weird stuff. And then you can just snap the surface and use the Z remodeler and do stuff to it too. But again, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it a different way. So this is the way we do it. And you can do this in any 3D program. If I click off, okay, so we're going to do it a little bit differently. That's the first way I want to show you how you can do it with the Z remesher. That's the way everybody talks about. And it's really probably the best auto downres or auto topology there is. Or you can do it by drawing it, and that's what there's a whole thing called hand plane that is all for that. There's Topo Gun, which is just for doing topology, just like I was just showing you, but it's cleaner and easier. Don't get me wrong, ZBrush is harder of them. And there's other programs, and you can do that same topology stuff that we were just doing with the lines inside of Max. But what I'm going to show you is an old school way that actually works much better now. After all this time, it actually works better, and I don't know if that's because the programs are better or it's just easier. Maybe this object's super easy, but with character I would do it this way too. So let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll go over the next way. Any questions before we go? And I'll show you why I'm not going to use project. But it probably will work now because I'm teaching, but normally when I do project, I always have aberrations of weirdness. So I'm going to take that low res one that we just made, and I'm going to say insert it into here. Okay, and then I'm going to come to inside of my subtools, and I'm going to say project. And inside project, I usually push this up because 0.20 doesn't really do it. 0.1 is maybe way too high, but we'll play with it. What project does is it takes one of your models, and it takes the information from the low res model or the high res model and tries to deform the low res model to better match the shape of the high res model. So in theory, what we used to do is we used to up-res, we down-res it like that, and then we'd up-res it, and then we project, and then we could go back into down-res because it's just a subdivision. But let's try this and see what happens. Okay. So that's what it got. And it does stuff. It's not perfect by any means, but the biggest problem, again, with this whole methodology is the Z remesher's issue with doing spiraling. So if I look at this whole thing goes around the outside. Plus, it's still giving me weird bumps and stuff. So I could try it again. You can do it a few times too. I could even do like up-res this once, then turn this back on, and then project all. Okay, and then turn this back off. And yeah, it's much closer in some ways, but it's still giving me some weirdness. And then I could go back down in the ZBrush or down in the division, so I still keep my low res one by going down to 1, and I can see how much better that looks. It's still not, I'm still not in love with it. So, and plus, this is a lot of extra space that's being used with the Z remesher. But anyway, yeah. Take a break, and we'll just come back at 420. Cool?